Well, good evening. So glad you could join us this evening for C3. We are excited to be able to come to you tonight with a very special guest. But before I introduce our guest, I just want to remind you, don't forget on Wednesday evenings in the sanctuary at 6 o'clock, you can join us for a communion service. We invite you to come, center yourselves spiritually, and receive the Holy Sacrament of Communion. Our chapel is open Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. You can come and pray. We have some small groups that are back up and running in the building, and we are back to in-person worship on Saturday nights in the south parking lot. So we want to invite you to come and be part of that on Saturday nights in the south parking lot at 6 o'clock. Sunday mornings are still online. You can still join us on our website, on Facebook, and on YouTube. But Saturday nights at 6, you can join us in person. So we are grateful that you could join us tonight. If you are joining us tonight not on Facebook, and you would like to maybe ask a question of our guest, please jump over to the Facebook side, send your question in on the chat, and we will get to as many questions as we can. We have some of our own as well. But now I'd like to just take a second and introduce our guest tonight. Her name is Mary Fan Gruber, and she is the Chief Executive Officer of Jefferson Regional Foundation, and she's been the CEO of that organization since November of 2013, and she spent most of her life, I believe, in the nonprofit community doing a variety of different things, and we are blessed to have her join us. They are doing an unbelievable work in the South Hills and in the Mon Valley. So Mary, welcome to C3. We're so glad that you could join us. And I just want to take a second and give you an opportunity to just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you would like us to know about you before we jump in to the big stuff, so to speak.
Thanks, Pastor Chris. Thanks for the invitation to come. It's really a pleasure. We've admired the kind of work that this church has done and how you've connected to the community and had chances to partner. So we're really glad to be part of this. I am a social worker by background and training and profession. And I've mostly worked, as you said, in the nonprofit community in mental health and victim services, but have spent some time in the foundation world now. This is the second time I've had the privilege of working in a foundation that gave out grants to the community. And personally, I'm really thrilled because during this pandemic, we had the joy of having our first grandchild, a granddaughter who was born just about 3 weeks ago. So that's been something that's been wonderful.
Oh, wonderful. Well, congratulations on that. That's super exciting. You mentioned that this is your second run at foundation and grant type stuff. The Jefferson Regional Foundation has had significant impact providing financial resources and technical assistance and collaborative opportunities to nonprofits in the South Hills and in the Mon Valley over the last 7 years. Can you tell us how the foundation was actually formed and what the priorities are when it comes to grant making?
Sure. It's an interesting story, and it's actually happened across the country, and that is as local hospitals struggle to maintain themselves individually, they have often found a reason to merge and consolidate. And that happened to Jefferson Hospital, which has served the South Hills and the Mon Valley for many decades. And in 2013, the foundation chose to become part of the Allegheny Health Network. So they were approached by Highmark Health. What happened as part of that agreement to be part of that hospital was funding of a foundation, which became Jefferson Regional Foundation. So we were gifted originally with $75 million as part of that agreement. We're one of several hundred health-focused foundations in the country. And what happens for communities is they gain a couple of assets. They often gain a hospital that maybe has more opportunities, more practices, more specialties, and is able to sustain itself, and also the addition of a foundation that can provide grants and invest back in the community.
Awesome. So we know your foundation, we've partnered with your foundation, and we know your foundation's funded other organizations that we partner with, like South Hills Interfaith Ministries and Prevent Point Pittsburgh. Can you share an example or two of how your foundation's support has improved the quality of life for people in the Mon Valley and in the South Hills?
Sure, happy to do that. So we have three priority areas, and within those priorities, there are other kinds of focused areas that we have. Most foundations do operate from priorities, even though it sounds like a lot of money, $2 or $3 million a year into the community. You do always have to make choices. There's so much need. So we do set these priorities. So one of the areas, for example, is a focus on children, youth, and families and their outcomes. An example of that is a program called Nurture PA. Nurture PA is an opportunity for parents to have a mentor via text. So the way that we're all working these days virtually is something that program actually anticipated several years ago. And new parents can communicate with, often it is the mothers, but can communicate with a mentor who has a lot of training and resources at their disposal to help them with questions and so on. We often work to build the community around particular populations or particular communities. The Bhutanese Community Association of Pittsburgh is a group that we've supported several times, and they do some wonderful work for their community. Many folks may know the South Hills is home to the largest group of refugees and immigrants. About 40 to 50% of them in Allegheny County live south, and they found these communities to be wonderful places to live. Another one I would just mention that might be of interest is a group that is faith-based called Blessing Board, that was started out of some churches in Penn Hills and Oakmont, and has now developed a site in McKeesport, and they collect and redistribute furniture, which is really an essential kind of service for people when they're struggling to rehouse or to furnish their own furnish homes for themselves when they're starting out or restarting their lives.
Awesome. Now, I know that Christ Church, through Genamar and others, especially the missions and outreach team, have been very active in the Jefferson Community Collaborative and on its Vision Council. Can you tell us a little bit more about that facet of your foundation and what the collaborative brings to the community?
Sure. So when people think of a foundation and funding, a lot of our work is about grant making. So we've done about over 13 million, about $13.6 million worth of grants in the past 6 years. But when we began early on, we hosted some day-long conferences, which we still continue to do, the Jefferson Forum every year. And we ask people who attended what should be our role as a new foundation. And what we learned and heard was that people wanted us to continue to convene groups and to share community information. And so we've taken that part of our role seriously as well. So we actually engage a lot of those kinds of activities. We have a network that we host of local organizations who provide programs and services in this area, called the Collaborative, that actually has 96 members who are active in that group. We have a directory that's online and also in print, that's available, of resources that we distribute to stakeholders like pastors and physicians and police and people that any resource people that someone might connect with. And we host a lot of other kinds of events and meetings and gatherings, and are happy to do that, and actually have added full-time staff who can support that kind of activity.
Well, and I know I attended one of those right before COVID hit, when you were talking about the census and the importance of being counted. I mean, what we learned at that was just eye-opening as far as how important being counted actually is when it comes to providing for people in the local community. And I know you've done a lot with voter registration and civic engagement, and there's all kinds of different ways that you can connect that way. Along those lines, what's neat about this is you're not a faith-based organization per se. We are, and we're able to work together. What role do you see the faith community as playing when it comes to, I don't know, creating and leading change in the community?
I think the faith-based community is essential in opening up discussions, in sharing information. So, for example, we've encouraged, as you are aware, we've encouraged clergy to talk about things like the census, which, after all, was in the Bible, and talk about the kinds of information that people might want to share. We've seen in my career, I've seen clergy and churches be the ones that helped victims of crime, that reached out to inform people about what kinds of opportunities they might have to serve, about opening up discussions between people who have different perspectives. So we've one of the ways that that your community, your congregation participated was in 2018. We brought a model here called we called it Around the Table South. But the idea was that you could host small conversation groups across the community and have people really talk about what are the strengths of the community, what are some ways that they might contribute and make change. And I know that your congregation was very involved in that, and all of us were poised to do that again in March. So that was one of the many activities that was canceled. But we were able to, in 2018, when we conducted that activity over a period of a week, about 1,000 people in our area, what we consider the Jefferson area, participated in those conversations in groups of 8 or 9 or 10 people. And we saw a lot of really wonderful small ideas and nurturing come out of that as well. The faith community is just really key and always has been. In my career, I've always relied on connecting with congregations, with pastors, with lay leaders, with wonderful folks that you have like Gina Marr, who actually bring a lot of information, share a lot of resources, and can engage with us in a whole different way. So really extends the impact.
Yeah, and you mentioned the Around the Table South, and we were excited for that to be happening, even though it didn't get to happen. Is that one of those things that you kind of still have on your radar, that once we get past whatever this is, that COVID is, and we are able to get back together, whatever that looks like, is that something that you foresee trying to get up and going again?
Yeah, we would love to do that model again. It's powerful. I think we saw people really see that as an impact. We did a lot of research the first time and found that 75% of the people who participated found it of great value. They met new people. They felt more informed about issues in their community just by meeting with other folks, and felt that they were going to do something differently or engage differently as a result. It's an interesting piece. I think in our communities, we're facing not just the COVID pandemic, but the racial pandemic. We have huge economic impacts, and we have a lot of division among people. And I think the idea of conversations and ways to move forward on together on many of these issues presents an ideal way to kind of address some of those. So I would love to bring those back. We've done a lot of things like most organizations, and like you, virtually. over the past few months. So we took our forum that we would have had in May, our day-long conference, and made that virtual too, and had a series of activities. And we've continued to host a lot of our meetings and collaborative and webinars and trainings, and just helping people to stay connected and informed virtually. But
Sure.
we'd all love to be back in person.
Yeah, and you kind of hit on it a little bit there, but with this whole during this time of COVID-19, churches, nonprofits, we've all kind of had to pivot in a variety of ways and be flexible and fluid in a variety of ways to continue to try to meet the needs of our like inside community, and then our local community, and then a little bit more wider or broader community. I know that the Jefferson Regional Foundation has been responsive by being flexible in the grant making process, even creating a COVID-19 emergency fund. Your boots on the ground in a lot of different areas beyond just the faith-based community. Can you tell us a little bit about how not only Jefferson Regional Foundation, but you've seen other nonprofit organizations in the community and what they're doing to meet the needs that are going on right now with COVID and everything else?
Yeah, it's been such a challenge for folks. Nonprofits are really, really good, as are the faith community, with making those individual connections and meeting the unique needs of people. We've seen all of our groups pivot and change. Much of it has been virtual connections, so taking programs virtually, but it's also been basic needs. So many of our youth programs pivoted to provide food and ongoing kinds of resources to families. Technology has been a huge concern. So having organizations, in some cases, identify those needs among community members and try to provide technology so that families could go to school, so that they could learn English if they were attending Literacy Pittsburgh, so that they could prepare for job training or search for jobs, all of those needs. So lots of pivoting on a constant basis. And that meant the telehealth. So some of the things that we've seen organizations do have been positive in that they've even reached broader communities than they thought. But it also has been a real challenge for organizations. Nonprofits really rely on community support. Most of them are small. They have budgets under $1 million. Under $3 million is a decent sized nonprofit. Big nonprofit has a $10 million budget or more. And so they really rely on having the opportunity to have events and donation campaigns. And so much of that was disrupted, particularly in the spring. So finding different ways to build community support and meet needs at a time when there was such a big, huge need was really demanding. So yeah, we were very, very pleased that our board approved an emergency fund of $500,000 that went to almost 20 organizations in just March and April. We gave that money out very quickly for those immediate needs. We actually have another impact fund now that we're using this year, recognizing that those impacts on nonprofits will continue as they have now, in some cases, run out of some of the CARES Act or PPP dollars or other special emergency grants that often are now gone.
And earlier this week, you did a forum on foreclosure resources and rental help. You're hitting lots of different areas of need, which is amazing and important and wonderful. Can you identify or tell us how you go about identifying those programs that you bring to the forefront? Like, how do you know where to get? Like, who are you in connection with to know where the needs are?
Yeah, that's a great question, And it's an ongoing process that we feel like we're a learning organization. We're constantly learning and trying to identify what those emerging needs are. The collaborative has been a great resource for that, and grantees, but we're always looking to understand what might be happening in the community. So, as you said, housing, rental, or foreclosure assistance are emerging issues. We're looking at, certainly, like other organizations, trying to apply a racial lens and understand where the impacts of racism really hit in our community, and the impacts of COVID, we know, have an uneven impact in our communities, and some people, particularly essential workers and healthcare workers and others, are affected more greatly. But we actually do community needs assessments every 2 or 3 years. The hospital also connects one. The health department conducts a needs assessment, and we spend a lot of time listening. It doesn't always sound like our job description, but when you work in a foundation, you really, your job really is to listen and to learn and to understand what the community is telling you. And so we try to spend a lot of time. Normally, we spend a lot of time out in the community, and really trying to get a sense of what's happening. We also learn a great deal from our grantees. So having people share what they've learned as they have developed a new program or tried some new approaches or new initiatives. Often people learn what works and sometimes what doesn't, and what's most effective. And so as a foundation, we can collect a lot of that information across different programs and projects, and also learn what we might invest in or what we might see next.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I don't know if a lot of people may or may not know this, but like pastors in the United Methodist Church, when we're appointed 1 year at a time. So if we're someplace for 20 years, we were actually appointed 20 times. But we're not
Wow.
appointed to the church. We're appointed to the community. We're there to make a difference in the community and the church. And I think that's a big piece that people can't miss. If we're going to really make a difference in our region, whether we're a nonprofit organization like you or whether we're a church, one of the biggest things we can do is actually be in the community and be listening to what people are doing. So it's great to hear that that's one of the ways that you guys are going about knowing what the needs actually are, so you can meet those needs. That is awesome. The Jefferson.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to say it's important to note that we actually have faith-based representatives. We have a vision council that helps lead our collaborative of 17 key leaders from the community and from community organizations. And we always make sure that we have pastors represented on that congregation. So Gina Marr from your congregation, from your staff, has served on that, which has been fabulous. Among others, we have libraries represented because they're key organizations in our area. One of the things I didn't mention that might be important to note is that when we talk about our area of service, that is determined by our original funding and charter. And so we actually dedicate our funding to 29 communities that are part of the South Hills, the Route 51 corridor, and the Mon Valley, and in particular, kind of the lower Mon Valley area. So it's an area that encompasses about 225,000 people that we focus on their health and well-being.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for your vision and for your leadership in our region. The Jefferson Regional Foundation and the Jefferson Community Collaborative are vital change agents. And we are honored to be able to partner with you in your endeavors. We look forward to being able to partner with you in the future on other things that you are doing. I'm going to leave the last word with you. Is there anything you would like the folks at Christ Church or the folks that are tuning in to watch this just to know going forward when it comes to your foundation?
Sure. I would encourage people, if they have an interest to learn more, to visit our website. It's Jefferson, R as in regional, F as in foundation.org. I would also remind you and your neighbors to be sure that you've participated in the census, that you vote on November 3rd, and that you wear a mask and socially distance. We're a health foundation, and we know that the social determinants of health, the ways that people live and work and play in the community, make all the difference, and we want everyone to be healthy and to be safe. So thank you for this opportunity.
Well, thank you for joining us. Keep up the great work. We look forward to working with you more in the future. Thank you for everybody that joined us this evening or will be watching in the upcoming days. Make sure you pray for the Jefferson Regional Foundation. Get connected in your community and in your church and in your local organizations, and try to continue to make a difference in this world to make people's lives better. So thanks for joining us. Have a great night, and we'll see y'all on Monday morning for a C3 devotional. Thanks, Mary.
Thank you.